yes on that, which I then obviously put on the timber. You sort of negate that. You transition from a, from the bottom shallow bit up to, out. And then glued in again with West System, and then with the little Stanley little rebate planes are very useful. Just trim in all for the divides, went in. Glued it back down, and then replaced the banding because that just exploded when it came out. It didn't come out very well, so that was an easy one just to replace. This was a solid ebony cabinet from about 1680. It had numerous repairs. I can't always show the whole piece of furniture because these are for dealers I've worked for. They don't really like you showing the finished piece, but I can show you parts as such. And there were a lot of repairs on this. There were splits all throughout because it was solid ebony panels. It weighed a ton. And that was just a repair to replace it and then carve in what was missing. So that was quite a nice job. Again, this is another back of a chair where the original marquetry on the one on the right had just completely been destroyed because someone had damaged the chairs, and the back of the chair, the splats had all broken through the front. So I had to cut a new one, sand shade it, just to match. Quite a simple one, that one. This is an interesting job I had. This is a William Kent table dating from about 1730, I believe, and the client wanted another one made. Not an easy job. I had the job of doing the cabinet work, and then it went to the carver, and then it was going to go to someone who specialised in finishing. Even though it's made in pine, which is unusual, but a lot of pine was used, it was gilded, and then the wood was painted with mostly a red oxide or something to look like mahogany. So it's a very interesting job because it was all just the blocks of wood, 3 inch thick, were just nailed together when it was put together, literally glued and nailed. That's how it was done then. Some of the work that time was quite crude. I mean, first I made up the top of it, which then went off to the carver because you had quite a tight deadline. So that was obviously the carving. She was a brilliant carver, did all the carving. And then making this moulding for the base was a real challenge because I haven't got spindle moulders, I've only got a round 1/2 inch router. So that's the size of the moulding I had to make. It's a big old moulding. So I made it up in sections and I routed it as I went so I could start it. So that bit was separate because I only had 2 inch boards of this pine, and then I just built it up. Because if you can restore, you can generally make, because it's a sort of similar mindset, I suppose, in a way. And then cutting those mitres was an absolute pain because I could only saw so far and then had to saw it through and then playing each one individually. There's a lot of mitres on that. Quite a pain. And that was that's how it went to the carver. That's about as far as we went. So at the moment it was just screwed together. I decided obviously rather than using nails, I just screwed it. And at this point I hadn't glued it together so she could take it apart because I suppose when it was made, as the blocks went on, the carver would do so much in the corners because some of it wasn't accessible, where I decided to put screws in which were plugged so then she could take it apart, and then it came back to me to be glued up. And that was the finished job after she'd finished. I haven't got a photo of it actually finished with the gilding and the sort of finish, which is a shame. But she did a fantastic job. Really nice job on that. Fun job to do. Quite a long job to do as well. To make the table, I think I quoted 8,500. They supplied the timber, and it was a lot of timber went into that. It's surprising how many board feet I needed for that.
Did you use brass screws?
No, I didn't. No, just used steel. So It will last as good as the nails that were in it before, which were still holding the original together. So I'm sure it'll be fine. Yeah. Can't remember. I think it took me maybe 3 months ish, but I don't work full time. Some weeks I get a bit scatty with dogs and things, so sort of.
Was the carver working with the actual original piece?
Yeah.
Was it from a draw set?
No, she had the original there, yeah.
Right, okay.
So obviously that would have been pretty much impossible to do that accurately.
So does your fee cover her fee or she's separate?
That was just my fee.
So what's the total fee for someone?
I dread to think. Because it was for another company and they put their huge bit on top. So, and then you obviously got to pay the decorator to gild it and paint it. I suspect that was mostly a 40, 50,000 pound job. It's got to be, must have been. Because the carving, she was on it for months as well. You know, so it's a very long-winded job. This is, I had to make, someone missed out auction at Gillo's table. So this is back in, I think, early 2000s. I had to make one because they wanted the table and they missed out in auction. So I'm just sticking up the timber. If this is plantation mahogany, because you could buy it back then, buy it in quite big boards, thick boards. And you can see there, I'm using again a large scratch stop with just a basic MDF box. So it's holding the leg, and it's basically like a U shape. So it can't run either way, it can only go track right down the middle. And I just had a simple cutter in that one. I made that scratch stop up just for that job. And then so basically I could just put the reeds in the leg. And again, it's really quick. Once you set it up, it's basically a machine. You've just got a jig and you can whack it out.
Yeah, is the pleated scratching, is that horizontal with the top? Because it's got a taper on it.
Well, because you're going in the middle and you're literally doing the groove in the middle, then it will go obviously with the taper, you know, because you're doing a half round. So you're not fully doing it and then you just tickle it in by hand with a bit of sandpaper.
Did you angle the leg in the jig so you got it flat? So your
I suppose so, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was most probably just to get the depth. Obviously, you adjust it so the depth is right, so that it's actually going at the right depth. It's a little bit of faff to get it right, but once you get it right, it's really quick.
You mentioned, because you're restoring old furniture,
Yeah.
period furniture, could you just comment on how much of a barrier you'll find in CITES, the restriction on endangered species? Is it really a barrier, or is it?
It's a barrier for dealers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a very famous case a couple of years ago, a really nice Chippendale desk sold in London, and it went to American buyer, and it had ivory in it, and they had to rip all the ivory out. Yeah. Otherwise, it couldn't have gone to America. Yeah. So, and there was a big debate, should that have happened? Is that really sensible to damage a piece of historic furniture? So it is an issue. Yeah, exactly. So there is a problem with CITES. I mean, a lot of the timbers are on CITES. Only a few are really restricted, rosewood, Rio rosewood, and obviously things like tortoiseshell and obviously ivory. They're the main ones. A lot are on the list where they're not critically endangered and you can still move them around. But yeah, it's only going to get more of a problem.
Do you think CITES will actually create the extinction of things like rosewood, which can't be exported and therefore not harvested or cared for, rather than making it legal to use and planting new stuff for the future?
Don't think so, because I think there's so little of it at the moment. That's the trouble.
Yeah, but there's little left. So if there's no incentive to plant new, for example,
Yeah.
you're going to lose it entirely in a few years.
No, I'm not sure about that. I don't know about the plantation of sort of certain timbers. I know like the mahogany, they plant it in India, and it's plantation mahogany, because you obviously can't export. All Cuban stuff has gone, the really good stuff, it's just been wiped out. So, yeah. I mean, I think they do try and grow other timbers in different places, so you haven't got those export bans. What they used to do on, where was the company, Craft Supplies, used to buy a mahogany blank, Cuban mahogany blank, and they would run a little bead up the edge and say it was a furniture component. And that's how they got round the restrictions at the time. And you know, it's just like a blank like that with like a little bead so small. That's a bit of furniture. And they would sell it so they could get round it. And that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, a really great presentation.
Thank you.
Did anyone have any questions, Gary, finally?
Yeah.
Is there good money in furniture restoration, or is it something you do purely for passion?
No. Generally, I always go over hours on jobs, and it's very hard to quote, really difficult. I mean, it's a lovely job. I do love it. Luckily, I've got the workshop at home. If I didn't have the workshop at home with rent, it wouldn't really be worth doing at the moment. There was in the past big London workshops, but there's only one left that I know of that's, I would say, a reasonable sized workshop. They all just can't sustain, obviously, the rates and rent of a London workshop. Most people now I know are like me, working in their garden, trying to keep the overheads down. It's a lovely job though, so I make enough, luckily. But because I'm at the top end, there's a bit more money. If you're at the low end, it's really tight. It's worse because the furniture's. I think it's like a lot of trades, manual trades. I think it's got a problem at the moment because the colleges aren't there that used to teach it. A lot of those have gone. The courses have gone because there's lack of interest maybe. And you know, when I started out, I was working 60, 70 hours a week to try and earn money. I don't know how many people are willing to work all sort of hours to make not a lot of money. So it is a problem. I would like to take on an apprentice, but I don't think I could afford to. You know, it's a tricky one at the moment.
Where do you get your work from?
It's mainly the trade in London, dealers generally. I haven't really got any private clients. I don't really look for private clients because when you build up a relationship with someone in the trade, you have an understanding what they want, how they want to sell it, what it should be like. So it makes life a lot easier. When you have private clients, they don't necessarily know what they want, which is the biggest problem. And getting that information is always hard because there's so many ways you can restore things.